One of the things I love seeing is technology being applied to everyday things you don't think too much about. And if you've ever spent time in a high-rise building, you have been startled by someone with a brush and a squeegee outside of your window. Window washing is a business that hasn't changed a whole lot over its history, but now there's a company that is changing that. So stay tuned. Hey everybody, this is Chris Brandt here. Welcome to another FUTR podcast. Today we're talking with Ross Blum, President and COO of Skyline Robotics, a company that is looking to disrupt the very blue-collar world of the facade maintenance industry with intelligent robotics. Now, this isn't just an automated car wash for buildings. This is more like car assembly line robotics. So let's talk to Ross about why they built this and where this is all going. Welcome, Ross.
Thanks, Chris, for having me. Really excited to be here with you today.
I absolutely love this kind of stuff. This is the kind of thing that, like in some regards, people don't really think about much, but this is actually a really big industry, right? I think you mentioned this is like a $40 billion industry, right?
Yeah, one of the least sexy things about maintaining a building is just making sure it looks, nice and clean on the outside, because you have tenants that are paying either their rents, or if you're a commercial building, you have large corporations renting that space, and they're paying for that prestige and that view, and you got to keep it looking very, very nice and clean. But every building in the world, whether it's a personal home, low-rise building, or a skyscraper, gets their windows clean. So it's the biggest small industry I've ever heard about.
I don't do windows.
Well, we could put you to work if you want.
I got to imagine, the window cleaners are, climbers in their lives, or they should be if they're not. And I always thought that aspect of it was really kind of exciting.
Honestly, I've been out in the field with many different, window cleaning teams. Those guys are heroes. And I really mean that. I mean, it is incredible what they do, hanging 1,000 feet in the air, plus doing manual labor, variable weather conditions. It can be 40 degrees outside. It can be 110 degrees outside. And they're getting the work done either way. It's really, really incredible what those guys are able to do. And I tip my cap to them, both literally and figuratively. But we think that we have a really an interesting way to sort of help them achieve, higher efficiency and not put their life at risk at the same time.
I want to talk to you about that. But before we get into all of that, let's just talk really quickly about how you got the idea for the company and how you guys got started.
Skyline was actually founded in 2017. And I actually didn't join the company until December 2020. So the actual idea for Skyline Robotics wasn't mine on its own, certainly. And they had very much dove deep into the product development cycle to get to the point of having a product leading up to my joining. But I think that the real issue that was being looked at, was really just a massive opportunity, because there had been a string of unfortunate safety incidents, that had been happened, that I think that the founders had seen. They went and spoke with the industry, to understand some of the potential pain points that they were facing. And just every single conversation, I think, just built a level of confidence that not only was this a good idea, but there could be a really big business behind it as well. So, this notion that we're going to, stabilize baskets 1,000 feet in the air with robotics, and clean some windows in the process, I think that the actual, product concept was evolved over the first 6 months of the company. But every conversation that they had was, let's say, conviction building. There was really something, to this, that there was really a big market need, for technology like this. And it just gave them the confidence to really plow full force ahead and try to make this a reality.
When I first heard this, I'm like, it's going to be like just a big roller on the outside of the thing, brush that just comes down the front of the building and then goes back up, right? Like when you're going through the car wash, you get that thing over the windshield and then somebody blows on you, right? But this is so utterly different than that. I mean, when I this is like the big robotic, and I'll run some video of like what you guys have going, but this is like a big robotic arm that's with intelligence and like you see on on a car factory assembly line, right?
100%. So we actually use a robotic arm manufactured by a company called KUKA. The decision point in sort of the development of the product, more and more sort of favored using that six-axis robotic arm. We had the founders had seen some implementations that had been attempted over time, but really, even if a facade was sort of flat up and down, the variability of windowsill sizing made it very difficult to sort of concept a product that would be able to apply to essentially any width of a windowsill at the end of the day. So rather than trying to go for that roller, as you were describing before, the founders actually drove, much more towards using that six-axis robotic arm, which has all the same joints that a human arm does. So we're really trying to mimic the human cleaning motion, which is able to access every single corner, of a window very fluently. While we're using a robotic arm that has a lot more power to it and, is very consistent and reliable and has a lot more features maybe than a human arm does at the end of the day. We're trying to, let's say evolve how we're cleaning, but using a very traditional sort of cleaning motion and mechanic to get that done.
When you think about what a facade of a building is like, I mean, there's, railings and, lights sticking out and all sorts of things that really, which is, I guess, the reason why it's been done by humans for so many years, right? I mean, because it's not something that, is, in some ways really safe or sane to do for people when, from my perspective, looking at it. But, it's been going on and on and on without really much change for all this time, right?
100%. And first, your first point about building geometry becoming more complex, that's certainly, a pattern that we continue to see. And as more buildings have been built, if you're a developer and you're building $1 billion+ asset, you do want it to stand out, a little bit from the crowd, right? You're trying to draw either residents to that building, you're trying to draw large corporations to that building, and cookie cutter, got everyone so far. And the architects are really dreaming big, at the moment. And we love and appreciate that. But at the end of the day, it does make certain procedures more complex. It might make some things, more straightforward. But at the end of the day, by leveraging a robotic arm, by having a LiDAR camera, which we actually use to sort of scan a facade and understand the parameters of each window. And then essentially we're trying to give the robotic arm the cleaning path that sort of paint between the lines. So it has the borders of each window, and then the cleaning motion sort of paints between the lines, if you will. And, we're able to, understand those parameters better and better every day. I mean, algorithmic development, the more environments we can get the system in, the smarter and smarter those algorithms will become over time. So that's a big piece of our sort of, let's say, R&D process, is just trying to be on as many facades, as possible to validate the algorithms in new environments.
One thing you just sort of alluded to there is, the height of buildings is growing every year. I mean, I'm from Chicago, so we know about tall buildings here, right? And we still have the tallest buildings. I don't care what anybody says, but and it's the Sears Tower. It's the Sears Tower. It's not the Willis Tower. It's the Sears Tower. If it's a Chicago, and Chicago will never call it the Willis Tower. Anyways,
of course,
but hopefully they're not a client of yours, and I'm just screwing it up. But
we love all tall skyscrapers. Let me clarify that for you up front.
Yes, right. No, but I mean, if you look at like Dubai and places like that, I mean, you've got some just absolutely massive buildings, right?
And we're really excited for those challenges. Yes, the architects are building bigger, designing bigger. The developers are building taller. There have been some talks of even taller buildings than are, sort of erected today. And we look at all this as just like a great sort of mixture of events that creates such a nice opportunity for a company like ours.
Yeah.
Because if you're going to build 1 kilometer in the air or 1.5 kilometers in the air, it's a lot to ask a human being to go up that high. I mean, yes, I know that we're going to have very high safety standards in situations like that.
Right.
But it's an extreme situation to put a human in. I personally, I don't know at what level you start to need oxygen. That could be a different type of concern, that might arise over
Well,
time.
I need
But
oxygen just to clean the windows of my house. I'm sucking air.
well, I need oxygen to do a lot less than that, but we won't talk about what I need oxygen for at the end of the day. But yeah, I mean, we look at this sort of convergence of factors between the labor shortage that's becoming more and more apparent in the industry, where in the US, 76% of window cleaners are above the age of 40, and only 8% are between the ages of 20 and 30. We look at everyone who would like to find cost savings, whether that's operational efficiency for us, whether that's insurance savings, as we're able to get out there and have more and more, safe performances of the technology. We look at this sort of like convergence of factors, between the heights of the buildings, how they're being designed, the demand for innovation, and the cost savings that a technology like ours can bring to the table as the right context to have success. But at the end of the day, our success will be decided by us, as I tell our team, all the time. No one's here to do us any favors, and we're going to have to go earn every piece of the puzzle that we can.
Well, like you mentioned, it's like this is an aging workforce, and some of these folks are sort of aging out of it. I mean, I imagine with those sort of really tall buildings, you can't get, Jackie Chan and Tom Cruise are getting really old to get up there and start cleaning windows. But something like what you're doing is not necessarily displacing those older workers. It's giving them a different way to do it so that they can actually maybe lengthen their career, right?
Our go-to-market approach for the existing built environment is really through the existing service providers, as we're already doing here in New York City, with our partner Platinum. We know what makes us special. What makes us special is being able to develop technology.
Right.
What doesn't make us special is having key relationships with every developer in each regional market around the globe, managing hourly workers and a field team, like these companies have done over decades and decades to build their businesses. Our job is to build great technology, support our partners, train them, and hopefully up level and upskill, their field team so that they can get higher hourly wages, as we're penetrating the market. So that's a big piece of the puzzle for us, is that, while there might be fewer bodies per site, the amount of cleanings can actually increase, and there should be no dip in sort of the amount of work that these workers are able to get or receive from completing the task of window cleaning, or more broadly, as we focus on the future, automating some other things that do happen on a facade as well.
So you mentioned, partners in this and all that. How do you don't sell this directly to the buildings typically, right? You sell them more to like the companies that do the facade maintenance.
And that was a strategic decision. Like if we wanted to go direct to building, we would need to have our own field teams, at the end of the day. So, again, to just think about what makes us special and different, and rather than trying to take on, every layer of the value chain as in sort of an antagonistic, approach, we thought it was just going to be smarter and more efficient for us to find key partners in key regions, create exclusive relationships, with them, and train their staff, and they can maintain their customers. We're not coming to steal their customers, at the end of the day. We're not here to offer every single service that they offer as well. A company like Platinum, anything that you can think of, metal, stone, wood, or glass, they're involved in. Right. So they can maintain their suite of services offering, they can maintain their customer, but we can just make them more efficient, and we can bring innovation and safety, and candidly just augment the workforce that is existing today. And hopefully create a lot of interest in becoming a robotic operating window cleaner, in the future.
There's a lot of infrastructure that kind of goes into the buildings around sort of facade maintenance and things like that, right? Does everything you're doing work with that traditional infrastructure?
That was one of the key sort of design points when the product was being developed initially. The founders were spot on that in order to sort of gain penetration in high compliance markets like in New York City, leveraging the existing infrastructure that a building has is going to be really, really important. So each building out there that has a basket on the side of the building, I don't know if you've seen those humans standing in a basket. I've lived in New York City my whole life, but before joining Skyline, I never really looked up. Well, when you look up, you can tell that there's a crane that's actually lowering that basket down, or in some cases, what's called a davit system, which is sort of a set of stanchions that's lowering that basket down on motors. But I never really looked up. But a key point in the sort of the product design was to leverage the existing infrastructure to make that market penetration that much easier. We're not here to reinvent the wheel on how everything works. But we are here to, evolve how we do something to make it more efficient, more safe, and hopefully a much more interesting experience for both the service provider as well as the developer or building owner themselves, because we can provide data and analytics to an industry that has never really experienced data and analytics. The
Right.
property managers don't go outside every day and check how many windows have been cleaned. But in every other portion of their business in managing a building, they're getting reports, every single day. This level of energy efficiency, is happening here. This gasket is broken here. And there's just no insight and analytics that the industry has really been able to provide that we would call acceptable in most other parts of our business.
And I know those baskets are a common movie theme. People are always falling out of those baskets on the side of buildings that always seem to be there for some reason. I don't know why they're always hanging off the side of a building in every movie. So I would imagine that this is a legit robotic arm here, and I got to imagine there's a certain amount of weight to that, right? Is it a comparable weight to a couple people in a basket?
The system design is meant to be that one robotic arm and its table that it sits on top of, is about equivalent to a human weight. So, it's important for us to keep that in mind because these baskets do have weight limitations.
Sure.
So they're, certified up to certain weight loads. Now, those weight loads do consider the fact that there's human life, contained in the basket. So most manufacturers actually design for a much higher weight limit. At the end of the day, and in New York, we have a 4x sort of weight ratio that needs to be applied. So if a basket says it has 1,000-pound weight limit, it really can hold 4,000 pounds. But because the risk of human life and all the insurance and risk that comes along with having a human there, we say the weight limit is 1,000 pounds. And that's the right thing to do, right?
Right.
We don't want to create any unsafe situation. Certainly the regulators don't. But the weight limitations are sort of derived from a mindset that there will be human beings, standing there.
Well, when you're putting a big robot over my head, I would appreciate if you adhere to err on the safe side.
We'll be happy to.
The way this works, you're applying there's a certain amount of you said you use LiDAR, and I imagine there's a certain amount of artificial intelligence as well that goes into kind of figuring all this out, right?
LiDAR is obviously mapping the facade, leveraging computer vision and other elements of that to be able to, localize, on those windows and be able to identify, where each of those window frames is. There's a lot of filtering that also needs to happen. So glass is highly reflective. Sun positions can change. And, there's a large amount of filtering algorithms that have been built so that we can really localize properly on those window sills. Then there's obviously the path planning for the robotic arm. So underneath the robotic arm in that waterproof table, the computer is essentially planning the cleaning path 250 times every single second. It's important for us to calculate in that sort of speed, because we are in the outdoor multivariable environment. So we have to be able to be prepared or adjust if, say, a wind gust comes along and shifts an axis of the basket. Now, our robotic arm actually has the capabilities to restabilize the basket as well. So you can imagine that as the robotic arm is cleaning, left to right on the window, it's both creating forces for that basket that can cause shifts, but it can also sort of counter-correct the basket as it's going. So on one side of the windowsill, it's very difficult to see, but for about 0.25 seconds, it might apply a little bit extra force on one side to restabilize the basket and continue its cleaning motion, down the side of the building. Now, the tip of the brush, we do have what's called a force torque sensor
Uh-huh.
So it's incredibly important that essentially we don't damage a facade that we're working on.
Sure.
There's there's two important things for a window cleaning company, right? Make sure the windows are clean, don't damage anything. At the end of the day. So the
Right.
force torque sensor is managing how much pressure is applied, and then we have redundancy for the force torque sensor with some distance lasers. So essentially, no matter what, even if there's a fault in that force torque sensor for any reason, the distance lasers will never allow the robotic arm to get within a certain distance, of the glass itself.
Right.
So it's important that we sort of think through each element, both in terms of how do we make this more efficient and how do we make it operate, safely. And it's got to be safe for humans, but it's got to be safe for the building as well, certainly.
I imagine when Skynet takes over finally and artificial intelligence rules the world, it'll start smashing out the windows as it goes around, right? Hopefully,
100%.
hopefully not. I thought the other interesting thing about this too was that, there's a lot of different ways to kind of approach the robotic cleaning of a window, but the way you guys approached it too, you're just using like traditional cleaning methods, like the brush and the squeegee, right?
So we actually only have one tool.
Oh,
So
okay.
we have a brush that's actually designed very similar to how window cleaning brushes looked maybe 50 or 60 years ago when they were using heavy horsehair brushes.
Right.
That horsehair brush, eventually sort of went out of fad because it was very heavy for the actual window cleaners to continually carry and sort of use for the manual labor on a daily basis. So that's where you saw sort of the two brush and squeegee system come in, is when the horsehair brush essentially was deemed to be too heavy.
Okay.
Now, we only need to use one tool because we actually deionize and purify the water through what's called reverse osmosis. So reverse osmosis is actually a window cleaning technique that is used already today in certain parts of the globe. If you go to Madrid or Sydney, Australia, we've spoken to folks in London that certainly use it as well. And it's just a way to minimize essentially the amount of tools. But by deionizing and purifying the water, you're removing all the particles that could dry and sort of leave a not so streak-free clean, look and feel to that facade. So by deionizing it, essentially it dries streak-free, clean, and you only need one tool when actually cleaning the window.
Man, who knew there was this much complexity in the just simple task of cleaning a window, which is not apparently such a simple task?
I'll tell you, I've learned a lot in about the first 2.5 years in this company. And it's been an incredible journey, and I'm sure I've got more to learn as well.
You mentioned that you're in a lot of different countries as well, and some of the countries you mentioned are old countries. And they have a lot of historic and registered buildings and things like that. So I got to imagine, in order to be able to access the facades of those buildings, there's a lot of like hoops you have to jump over, right?
Potentially. So, while there's nothing about the algorithms of the robotic arm that wouldn't be applicable on any building, candidly, around the world, we do look for buildings that have that pre-existing infrastructure that we're looking for. So whether it's that Davit system, whether it's that crane on the rooftop, not every building in the world has that equipment already. And even, let's say in more of like the uptown part of New York, you have some pre-war buildings,
Right.
That don't have that equipment, and they're brick facades and things of that nature. We want to get there. But right now we're starting, with buildings that more likely have been built in, say, the last 40 years than the buildings that have been built, 100 plus years ago.
I think that makes sense. And probably the buildings that were built more 100 plus years ago aren't as tall anyways. And, it's probably not as practical an application, right?
Certainly the bigger buildings have been built more recently. For the most part, Empire State Building, it's an incredible engineering feat that they did way before many other skyscrapers were coming out of the ground. But for the most part, yes, the skyscrapers as we know skyscrapers today are relatively new, from the standpoint of, the last 40 years rather than 100 plus years ago.
I will throw another thing out for Chicago here. This is where skyscrapers were born. Burnham.
One
Daniel
day
Burnham.
you might see One day you might, in the not so distant future, Chris, maybe you'll see Osmo working on a building in Chicago.
How did you come up with the name Osmo? I love that name.
Again, I got to give the credit where the credit's due. So I did not come up with the name, but it's generated from what I was just referring to with reverse osmosis.
Ah, okay.
So Osmo is derivative from osmosis, in that way. And I think it's a name that people either have latched onto really really hard, or some people have said, what did you mean? Is that a word that you're saying? But at the end of the day, we're really proud of Osmo and what Osmo is capable of. But we know we're not done yet. We know we got to keep building out Osmo, its capabilities. We certainly want to see product extensions reach other parts of facade access overall. And one of the key things from that standpoint, Chris, is really something that might be akin to, let's say, an inspection service.
Right.
So, if you take a market like New York, inspections are required every 5 to 7 years under what's called Local Law 11.
Right.
But window cleaning happens multiple times every single year. And by adding a few interesting types of cameras and sensors to go along with our system, we can not just map the facade, which we're already doing with the LiDAR, but then start to build things on top of that map, as we're going. So with energy regulations coming into effect here in New York in 2025 and then getting stricter in 2030, we actually see a massive opportunity to provide data, insight, and analytics in terms of how healthy a facade is. So internally, we call this a facade health profile. And facades are actually one of the leading reasons why HVAC systems can become overused and create, extreme sort of carbon emissions for a building at the end of the day. If the windows aren't sealed fully and temperatures change drastically, that HVAC system continually works. And there was actually an article published by Bloomberg this week based on the Real Estate Board of New York, or REBNY's, analysis of the market and how many buildings are not compliant with regulations coming in.
Yeah.
And they estimated this week that starting in 2030, New York's going to have a $900 million annual problem from the standpoint of that's the level of fines that the regulators will start to hand out when the regulations become more strict in 2030. So again, we sort of feel like being on the side of the building already, being really unique in the world of robotics, being in that outdoor multivariable environment rather that indoor controlled environment, or being really, really unique in the world of what's called prop tech or real estate technology, because, we're focused on what happens outside of the four walls, whereas everyone else is focused on getting people into those four walls, being more efficient, with getting tenants in or tenant satisfaction, things of that nature. We feel that we're really well positioned to take advantage not just of the existing business that we're building today with window cleaning, but really taking that a step further and really becoming a much broader sort of facade access automation tool that can help developers, property managers, and otherwise really manage their asset in a very different way. Because with financial penalties coming in, the calculations on how important it is to check on your facade are changing, and they're changing like live today. And we're really excited, about the opportunity we have in front of us.
It sounds like there's even like a little bit of a sustainability component to this in terms of just, making these buildings a little bit more airtight and things like that, huh?
Air and water infiltration, definitely part of, where we need to take the product. And I'll be clear that we're not out there doing that today.
Right.
But it is somewhere that we're going with the product. And because we're already on the side of the building, because we have partners, that are going to bring us to different buildings all around the world, we do feel that we're relatively, at least uniquely positioned, to sort of be that solution on a much larger scale, for a much broader audience group.
Talking about looking forward as to where this could all go. I mean, I could see, if you're on the outside of a building with a big, robotic arm that's as capable as a human arm is, I can't imagine there's just a lot of stuff you could do, because like we were talking about earlier, the facades of buildings are getting more complex. I got to imagine there's needs to replace pieces of, those things. There's lighting on the sides of buildings.
There's all different sorts of jobs we can do on the facade. Window cleaning is the starting point. Certainly the facade health profiles is a nice extension, but there's polishing, there's masonry work, there's what's called water pressure testing. When they're trying to find where a leak, in a seal is coming from, they have to send a human out there and just spray water all around a window and try to find where's that leak. But we're already out there, with water, and might be able to help make that process, much more efficient for people already. Window replacement is out there, but as you're sort of describing here, and what we've talked about is the designs are getting more complex. Window patterns can be different. So it is tough to some extent to develop, the machine learning algorithms to replace with so much variability, to window design or installation procedures and things of that nature. So we know it's out there and we're interested by it. Don't get me wrong. We just don't know that it's sort of like the next leap, that we make with the product at the end of the day.
Well, you got to pace yourself a little bit. I mean, you can't boil the ocean, right?
My team knows I want the whole thing done tomorrow. So no, I'm joking. No, there's more development work to be done, but we've got an incredible team. We've got an incredible CTO and an incredible R&D team, behind him. And we're just, excited by everything that's happening in and around the business.
I absolutely love everything you're doing. I think this is such cool stuff. I love this kind of stuff. My only request is that you put googly eyes on it if you're going to call it Osmo.
I'll see what I can do.
See what you can do about that.
Yeah. I mean, do they need to be a certain color eyes? Can we get
just
that
big.
specific?
I want
for
big
you?
ones.
Just big.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. We'll see if we can get Mickey Mouse in here and get some eye dimensions.
Well, don't do Mickey Mouse because you're going to get sued over that. You know how Disney is.
Well, no, just measuring the eye dimensions.
Okay.
I feel like he's got big eyes.
He does have big eyes. He does have big eyes.
But at the end of the day, we're happy to sort of be on this journey. Try to be humble and hungry every step along the way. And, we know that we're onto something special. That's no longer the question. And we just got to be out there executing and working our tails off each and every day.
Well, it's super cool, man. I appreciate you coming on and telling me all about all this stuff and just it sounds super interesting. And good luck with everything.
I really appreciate being on the podcast with you, Chris. Look forward to hopefully more sessions with you as we keep evolving what we're doing. And just thanks again for having me. Truly a privilege, and can't wait for what's next.
Yeah, well, keep us posted. Thanks for watching. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. And if you could, please think about giving us a like and hitting that subscribe button, because that subscribe button is really helping the channel. And I will see you in the next one.